Hello lovely people. So today I'm reading from Meditations on the Tarot, a journey into Christian Hermeticism. We're on part 2 of letter 19, the Sun. No more is it true that the mystical impulse from the end of the 13th and into the 17th century was purely and simply a reaction against the dry intellectualism of scholasticism. No, the flowering of mysticism during this epoch was the fruit and the result of scholasticism, prefigured in the spiritual biography of St. Thomas Aquinas himself. Notably, St. Thomas towards the end of his life arrived at mystical contemplation of God and the spiritual world, and said on returning from this ecstasy that his written works now appeared to him like straw. And indeed he wrote nothing after this. The believing thinker thus became a seeing mystic. And this transformation didn't take place in spite of his work of scholastic thought, but rather thanks to it, as its fruit and crowning glory. Now what happened to St. Thomas Aquinas also happened to a group of individuals who formed the crest of the wave of scholasticism. Just as St. Thomas through scholastic reasoning arrived at contemplation, so did part of advanced scholasticism arrive at mysticism, i.e. at the aim of scholasticism, which is intuition or the state of union of faith and intelligence. Meister Eckhart, Ruysbroeck, or lastly St. John of the Cross are spirits amongst whom you will search in vain for a spirit of opposition to scholasticism. For them also it was true that scholasticism was like a straw, but they knew at the same time from their own experience that this straw proved to be an excellent combustible. They certainly surpassed scholasticism, but they did so by attaining its aim. For the aim of scholastic endeavour is contemplation, and it's mysticism which is the fruit of the scholastic tree. The mystics of the epoch under consideration were individuals who signified a successful outcome of the scholastic endeavour, i.e. in them intelligence was baptized and Christianized. The missionary work with regard to pagan intelligence undertaken by St. Albertus Magnus and St. Thomas Aquinas was crowned with success in the guise of the mystical impulse which followed high scholasticism. The marriage of faith and intelligence was consummated, and believers and thinkers were reinforced by a third group, that of the people of intuition. Thus, dear unknown friend, do not at all despise medieval scholasticism, but make use of it, not only to re-establish the health of your soul, but also by thinking in the light of faith to arrive at intuition, without which Hermeticism is something merely literary, of doubtful literary value. It lives only from intuition, and without intuition it's something dead. And it's this dead thing alone that is seen by people of faith and people of science, who are genuinely astonished that there are people who take it seriously. They see only scientific and religious tinsel, or at most a weak faith which borrows crutches from science, or perhaps a childlike science which has not yet learnt to distinguish between what one believes and what one knows. And they are not at all mistaken. Without the invisible cement of intuition, Hermeticism is indeed only an impoverished assemblage of heterogeneous elements of science and religion. It suffices to indicate the following analogy. It was neither the straw of the crib nor the animals that were present which guided and enabled the mages from the east to find the child, but rather the star in heaven. Similarly, in Hermeticism, one will find only straw and animals if one is not guided by its star, which exists only for intuition. Now it's the 19th arcanum of the tarot which invites us to occupy ourselves quite especially with the star of Hermeticism in the heaven of intuition. So what is this star? The Zohar says, quote, "And God made the two great lights. Originally, when the moon and sun were in intimate union, they shone with equal luminosity. The names Jehovah and Elohim were then associated as equals, and the two lights were dignified with the name Mazpaz Mazpaz. The two lights rose simultaneously and were of the same dignity. But the moon humbled herself by diminishing her light and renounced her place of higher rank. From that time she has had no light of her own, but derives her light from the sun. Nevertheless, her real light is greater than that which she radiates here below, for a woman enjoys no honour save in conjunction with her husband. The great light, the sun, has the name Jehovah, and the lesser light, the moon, has the name Elohim, which is the last of the degrees and the close of thought. Originally, she was inscribed above among the letters of the sacred name, the Yod, the He, the Vav, and the He, which are 4 in number. It was only after diminishing herself that she took the name Elohim, but her power is manifest in all directions. El being the dominion of the day, Im being the dominion of the night, and He in the middle being the remainder of the forces, the stars, participating in both dominions. That's from the Zohar, the Bereshith. It's left to us only to cite another passage from an ancient source from the 11th book of Apuleius, Transformations, in order to have all the elements necessary to grapple sufficiently equipped with the problem of the star of Hermeticism and the sun of the 19th arcanum of the Tarot. Apuleius summarised his great vigil at the temple of Isis, the arcana of the sacred night, in the following way. Quote, I approached the very gates of death and set one foot on Persephone's threshold, yet was permitted to return, wrapped thoroughly in all the elements. At midnight I saw the sun shining in it, brilliant radiance. I entered the presence of the gods of the underworld, and the gods of the upper world stood near and worshipped them. That's from the Golden Ass, Transformations, Apuleius. Let's now seek for the reality, having in view the above-cited passage from the Zohar and the statement made by Apuleius. The Zohar tells us that the moon renounced her place of higher rank, that of equality with the sun, and that from that time she has had no light of her own, but derives her light from the sun. Nevertheless, her real light is greater than that which she radiates here below. Here below, therefore, the moon reflects the light of the sun, whilst above, where her name is Elohim, her power is manifest in all directions. El being the dominion of the day, Im being the dominion of the night, and He in the middle being the remainder of the forces, the stars, participating in both dominions. Now the moon, insofar as she is the nocturnal luminary here below, reflects the sun, but insofar as she is the nocturnal luminary above, she shines with her own light, and it's the sun which reflects her. In other words, the moon is solar above and lunar here below, whilst the sun is solar here below and lunar above. It's in this sense that El, the radiant part of the moon's name above, has the dominion of the day, i.e. it is the visible sun reflecting the invisible moon during the day. Similarly, the visible moon reflects the sun, becomes invisible during the night. The spiritual moon is therefore the sun which shines at midnight. And it's the spiritual moon, or Isis Sophia, that Apuleius saw shining at midnight in its brilliant radiance. For the long vigil in the Isis temple resulted in a vision of the cosmic principle of Isis, the spiritual moon, or the sun at midnight. All these things, although presented to us in mythological clothing, relate to the profound reality of the relationship of intelligence and wisdom, and their union, which is intuition. For intelligence corresponds to the moon, wisdom to the sun, and intuition to the restoration of the intimate union of the two luminaries. Here below, intelligence reflects wisdom, or if it's eclipsed, it reflects the terrestrial world of external experience. But there is another intelligence above, a transcendental intelligence whose light is greater than that which it radiates here below, and which, united intimately to wisdom, is inscribed above among the letters of the sacred name, the Yod, the He, the Vav and the He, which are 4 in number, and which shines in the middle of the night in its brilliant radiance. This higher intelligence, this sun at midnight, which is the conjunction of the spiritual sun and spiritual moon, or in other words, the intimate union of intelligence and wisdom, is the star of Hermeticism, and it is the sun of the 19th Arcanum. The sun of the 19th Arcanum is the sun at midnight, i.e. the sun that Apuleius saw shining at midnight in its brilliant radiance. And it's this sun which is the star of Hermeticism across the ages. It's the principle of intuition, or the intimate union of transcendental intelligence and wisdom. The arcanum of intuition is, therefore, that of knowing how to raise to creative intelligence the intelligence which reflects, and how to effect its union with wisdom, i.e. that of the work of re-establishing firstly the union of intelligence of diminished light here below with the intelligence of complete light above, and then the union of intelligence thus reunited with divine wisdom. The triangle of the figure below shows in a most clear way what the relationships are. Intelligence, attracted by wisdom, does not unite itself to the latter on the plane of reflection, but raises itself to the creative plane, where it regains its higher non-fallen status and unites with wisdom, the result of which union is intuition. Therefore, it's not thanks to the suppression of intelligence, or by becoming less intelligent, that intuition is attained, but rather on the contrary, it's thanks to its intensification until it becomes creative and is thus united to its higher transcendental aspect, after which it's united to wisdom. It's therefore by becoming more and more intelligent that one arrives at intuition, although there is another way, that of sunstroke, namely the annihilation of intelligence by the brilliance of wisdom, which is the theme of the 21st Arcanum, the Fool. We shall therefore return to this in the 21st letter on the major arcana of the Tarot, which is dedicated to the Fool. But those who hold to the tradition of Hermeticism, that of mysticism, gnosis, magic, and Hermetic philosophy, keep away from the way of divine folly, and follow the way indicated by the parable of the talents, where the master entrusted his servants with a number of talents, each according to his ability, so that they should put them to good account. Thus they raise intelligence to a level at which it becomes capable of uniting with wisdom. They render it of maximum account, which is intuition. Just as the impulse of scholasticism on the historical ladder of Western civilization didn't lead to a perfect system of scholastic philosophy, but rather to mysticism, so does individual intelligence on the ladder of individual development lead to intuition, and not to a state where it knows all and explains all. Intelligence is not the absolute aim in developing, it's transformed into intuition. It's called to effect the passage from argumentative reasoning to comprehensive intuition. In relation to the theme of the mission of intelligence being the way to intuition, it's relevant to indicate the fact that the philosophical work of Immanuel Kant, which scorched the pretensions to certainty of autonomous intelligence with respect to metaphysical things, by demonstrating the set limits of knowledge possible to autonomous intelligence, has had an effect comparable to that of wind, which extinguishes the weak fire and which revives the strong fire, the one becoming skeptics and the others becoming mystics. Kant put an end to the speculative metaphysics of autonomous intelligence and opened up the way to a mysticism which non-autonomous intelligence or practical reason is capable of. Kant's practical reason, being intelligence united with the wisdom of moral nature, i.e. intuition, and indeed several times I have had occasion to observe the fact, with time, Kantians become mystics. To name, for example, the German philosopher Paul Deussen, the author of a synthesis of Kantianism, Platonism, and the Vedanta, the elements of metaphysics. Deussen's fundamental thesis is that the incapability of autonomous intelligence attaining to the noumenon behind phenomenon, demonstrated by Kant, entails the task of resorting to intuitive perception of the essence of things, which is manifested in Platonism and in the Vedanta. It was probably with a view to showing the working of the intuitive method that Deussen translated and published 60 Upanishads from the Vedas. But let's return to the star of Hermeticism, to the midnight sun, which is the sun of the 19th arcanum of the Tarot. The Zohar and Apuleius have helped us to understand an important aspect of the sun, namely that of the intimate union of the sun and moon, or of wisdom and intelligence, in the guise of the midnight sun. A third ancient document can now help us to place ourselves in the presence of another important aspect of the problem occupying us, and presents it to us in its entirety. This is the Apocalypse of St. John, where we read, "And a great portent appeared in heaven, a woman clothed with the sun, with the moon under her feet, and on her head a crown of 12 stars." The Zohar and Apuleius speak of the moon and the sun joined. Here we have an image of a moon on its side and the sun coming out of it, which is the sign of Isis. We find this sign again in the apocalyptic vision of the woman enveloped by the sun and with the moon under her feet, but the apocalyptic vision adds here a third element, the 12 stars. In other words, intelligence united to wisdom in intuition still does not signify the achievement of the work of reintegration of consciousness, if it is not crowned by a third element which corresponds to the stars, just as intelligence corresponds to the moon and wisdom to the sun. What therefore is this third element? In order to understand its role and nature, it is still necessary for us to look at, and this time more closely, the experience of spirits who turned from intellectualism to intuitionism, as we indicated above in speaking of the effect of the work of Kant. We mentioned the German philosopher Paul Deussen, but perhaps it would be more to the point to mention his master, the German philosopher of worldwide renown, Arthur Schopenhauer. For it was he, author of the celebrated book The World as Will and Representation, who made the decisive step from Kant's thesis that phenomena hide the essence of things, and that the essence remains inaccessible to intelligence as such, to the intuitive introspection of the essence of one thing, the self, a thing that represents and contains the other things of the world. This intuitive introspection allowed him to arrive at the conclusion that it's the will which is the essence of things, and that things are only representations of the will. Therefore, the world is, according to Schopenhauer, a unique will which represents or imagines the multiplicity of things. And as Schopenhauer found that the same experience gave rise to almost the same conclusion in Indian mystical philosophy, above all in the Vedanta, based on the Upanishads of the Vedas, he said, "The Upanishads were my consolation in life, and they will also be so in death. Thus, the mystical philosophy of India is the original and prototype of intuitionist philosophies of the West, such as that of Schopenhauer, Dussel, and Edward von Hartmann. Let's therefore examine the fundamental experience and principal conclusion to be drawn from the mystical philosophy of India, as represented by the Vedanta of Advaita, non-dualist school. This philosophy is founded on intuitive introspection as method. This is based on the one hand on experience of the will as the element underlying all intellectual, psychological, biological and mechanical movement, and on the other hand on the experience of the inner eye or detached transcendental self, which observes the movements produced by the will. The will creates the multiplicity of mental, psychic, biological and mechanical phenomena, in contrast to the unity of the seer in seeing. The transcendental self does not move, therefore it does not change, therefore it is immortal. Therefore it is not an entity separated from the real essence of the world, and thus it's one with it. The true self of man and the essence of the real world, or God, are identical. I am Brahma. This is the formula which gives a summary of the experience and conclusions drawn by the Vedanta. Now it suffices on the one hand not to identify with the will and its movements, and on the other hand to identify with the transcendental self, the seer in seeing, in order to attain to the real being and essence of the world in the intuitive experience of Vedanta, adherents and German intuitionist philosophers. But one could ask, is the intuitive experience of the transcendental self truly final and complete, so that nothing follows it or surpasses it? Is the experience of the transcendental self truly the ultimate of knowledge? Indeed, it lacks something important, the whole spiritual world, i.e. the Holy Trinity and the 9 spiritual hierarchies. The great portent of which the Apocalypse speaks indicates beyond the sun and moon a crown of 12 stars on the head of the woman. The intuitive experience of the transcendental self, sublime and stimulating as it may be, doesn't suffice alone to let us perceive and to render us conscious of the spiritual world. The union of the moon and the sun alone in the human spiritual microcosm still doesn't signify the experience of the spiritual macrocosm. It's not sufficient to elevate oneself to the transcendental self. It's necessary still further that this transcendental self perceives and becomes conscious of other transcendental selves, many of which are higher than it. The transcendental self of man, as eternal and immutable as it is not the ultimate summit in world evolution. The transcendental self is not God. It is in his image and after his likeness, according to the law of analogy or kinship, but it's not identical with God. There are still several degrees on the ladder of analogy which separate it from the summit of the ladder from God. These degrees, which are higher than it, are its stars or the ideals to which it aims. The Apocalypse specifies the number of them. There are 12 degrees higher than that of the consciousness of the human transcendental self. It is necessary, therefore, in order to attain to the one God, to elevate oneself successively to degrees of consciousness of the 9 spiritual hierarchies and the Holy Trinity. The conclusion of the Vedanta, declaring the identity of the transcendental self and the one God, is therefore an error due to the confusion of values. Here the image and likeness of God is taken for God, and experience of the divine likewise is taken to be God. All which glitters is not gold, and all which is transcendental and immortal is not God. For the devil also is transcendental and immortal. This confusion can easily take place if one keeps exclusively to the empirical psychological method, whilst avoiding the principle of transcendental metaphysics. Thus, even Carl Jung only narrowly missed identifying his psychological experience of the seventh archetype, the transcendental self, with what religions call God. It was only thanks to his prodigious prudence that he had, though, left the door open and did not go as far as to pretend to have had a psychological experience of God. Then again, consider disciples of the Sankhya metaphysical school, concerning which Krishna said, quote, "Fools, not wise men, say that Sankhya, renunciation of action to know God, and Yoga, pursuit of action living in God, are distinct. He who practices one fully earns the fruits of both. The place which the followers of Sankhya obtains is also The place which the followers of Sankhya obtains is also gained by the followers of Yoga. He sees truly who sees the Sankhya and the Yoga as one and the same. They have therefore the same experience of the transcendental self as yogis and Vedantins, yet without arriving at the conclusion that the transcendental self is God. On the contrary, thanks to the principles of their metaphysics, they recognize the plurality of individual Purushas, i.e. the plurality of transcendental selves. Thus, the same experience can give rise to different, even contrary interpretations, if one applies different directing metaphysical principles. Yoga and Sankhya are one and the same with respect to the experience of the transcendental self, but they differ radically with respect to the interpretation of this experience. The men of Yoga believe that with it they have attained God, whilst the men of Sankhya do not pretend to have achieved anything other than the experience of the individual transcendental self, the individual Purusha or monad, in the sense of Leibniz's term. One could also say in the symbolical language of the Bible that Yoga attains to union of the two luminaries, the moon or intelligence and the sun or spontaneous wisdom of the transcendental self, and halts there, while Sankhya also attains this, but it takes account of still a further kind of luminary, the stars, higher entities of the spiritual world. Sankhya, whilst leaving the door open to that which transcends the transcendental self, doesn't occupy itself with it, it's true, in an explicit manner, but has given it the qualification atheistic. However, its atheism does not amount to its denying the existence of a universal Purusha higher than all individual Purushas. It professes to know nothing of this with certain knowledge, but rather to its denying the affirmation of Yoga and Vedanta, i.e. that the transcendental self is God. In contrast, Judeo-Christian Hermeticism, which ranges itself on the side of Sankhya with respect to the negation of the identification of the transcendental self with God, is intensely occupied with the third luminary, the stars, in the three aspects of astrology, angelology, and Trinitarian theology, which aspects correspond to the body, soul, and spirit of the third luminary. Judeo-Christian Hermeticism is thus the sustained effort across the centuries to know and understand the three luminaries in their unity, i.e. to know and understand the great portent which appeared in heaven, a woman clothed with the sun and with the moon under her feet, and on her head a crown of 12 stars. It's the woman in this apocalyptic vision who unites the three luminaries, the moon, the sun and the stars, i.e. the luminaries of night, day and eternity. It's she, the Virgin of Light, the Pistis Sophia, the wisdom sung of by Solomon, the Shekinah of the Kabbalah, the Mother, the Virgin, the pure celestial Mary, who is the soul of the light of the three luminaries and who is both the source and aim of Hermeticism. For Hermeticism is as a whole the aspiration to participation in knowledge of the Father, Son and Holy Spirit, and the Mother, Daughter, and Holy Soul. It's not a matter of seeing the Holy Trinity with human eyes, but rather of seeing with the eyes and in the light of Mary Sophia. For just as no one comes to the Father but by Jesus Christ, so does no one understand the Holy Trinity but by Mary Sophia. And just as the Holy Trinity manifests itself through Jesus Christ, so understanding of this manifestation is possible only through intuitive apprehension of what the Virgin Mother of Jesus Christ understands of it, who not only bore him and brought him to the light of day, but also was present as Mother, at his death on the cross. And just as Wisdom Sophia, as Solomon said, was present at the creation when he established the heavens, I was there. When he drew a circle on the face of the deep, then I was at work beside him. And built her house, set up her 7 pillars. That's from Proverbs. So Mary Sophia was present at the redemption and was at the work beside him, and built her house, set up her 7 pillars. She became Our Lady of the 7 Sorrows, for the 7 sorrows of Mary correspond for the work of the redemption to the 7 pillars of Sophia for the work of creation. Sophia is the queen of the 3 luminaries, the moon, the sun, and the stars, as the great portent of the Apocalypse shows. And just as the Word of the Holy Trinity became flesh in Jesus Christ, so did the light of the Holy Trinity become flesh in Mary Sophia. The light, i.e. threefold receptivity, the threefold faculty of intelligent reaction or understanding, Mary's words, mihi fiat secundum verbum tuum, let it be to me according to your word, are the key to the mystery of the relationship between the pure act and pure reaction, between the word and understanding. Lastly, between Father, Son and Holy Spirit on the one hand, and Mother, Daughter and Holy Soul on the other. They are the true key to the seal of Solomon, the Hexagram. The hexagram is not at all the symbol of good and evil, but rather it is that of the threefold pure act or fire, and the threefold pure reaction. The threefold mihi fiat secundum verbum tuum, or light of fire, water. Fire and water signify that which acts spontaneously and creatively on the one hand, and that which reacts reflectively on the other, the latter being the conscious yes, or light. This is the elementary meaning of the Seal of Solomon. Elementary in the sense of the elements, fire and water, taking at their highest level. But the still higher meaning that this symbol hides, or rather reveals, is that of the luminous Holy Trinity, i.e. that of understanding of the Holy Trinity. Then it's the hexagram comprising the 2 triangles, Father, Son and Holy Spirit, Mother, Daughter, Holy Soul. And these 2 triangles of the luminous Holy Trinity are revealed in the work of redemption accomplished through Jesus Christ and conceived through Mary Sophia. Jesus Christ is its agent, Mary Sophia is its luminous reaction. The 2 triangles reveal the luminous Holy Trinity in the work of creation accomplished by the creative word and animated by the yes of Wisdom Sophia. The luminous Holy Trinity is, therefore, the unity of the triune Creator and the triune Natura Naturans, i.e. the unity of the threefold fiat and the threefold mi fiat secundum verbum tuum, which reveals itself in Natura Naturata, in the world created before the fall. And it's the triune divine spirit and the triune soul of the world manifesting in the body of the world, in Natura Naturata. The Zohar puts forward the idea of the luminous Holy Trinity. It teaches that the great name of God, the Yod, the He, the rather than the He, reveals the Father, Y, the Yod, the Supreme Mother, He, H, the Son, the Ve, or V, and the Daughter, the second He, or H, of the Divine Name. Such is the eternal name, Yod He Vav He. But in the history of the created world, there are also revealed the Shekinah, identified with the community of Israel, the true Rachel weeping for her children, who weeps in exile, and who is the beautiful virgin who has no eyes. The Messiah King who descends and reascends through all the heavens in order to exercise with all the prophets who are to be found the universal function of salvation. And the Ruach Hagodesh, the holy breath or Holy Spirit, of which Sajjah speaks, through the intermediary of which the 32 ways of wisdom are incorporated in the air that one breathes, the holy breath, by means of which God is revealed to the prophets at the foundation of the secret of creation, and which is called the breath of the living God. The Messiah is the seventh term or principle of the hexagram Father, Son, Holy Spirit, Mother, Daughter, Holy Soul. He is the agent of all the active summary of the bipolar Trinity, or as we have called it, the luminous Holy Trinity. With respect to concrete manifestation of the Shekinah, it is as a woman that she now appears in the visionaries among the Kabbalists, like Abraham Halevi, a disciple of Luria, who in 1571 saw her at the Wailing Wall in Jerusalem as a woman dressed in black and weeping for the husband of her youth. The weeping lady of La Salette also wept at the foot of a wall, no less real than the Wailing Wall in Jerusalem, the wall of universal sin which is placed between humanity and divine grace. But she differs from the Shekinah of the visions of the Kabbalists and Hasidim, in that she is not the personification of a principle, i.e. she is not solely an aspect of the divine, but rather is a human person who existed in the flesh at the bosom of the visible community of Israel 20 centuries ago. Similarly, the Messiah, whom many have seen and met during the last 20 centuries, is no more than only a spirit who descends and reascends to all the heavens in order to exercise with all the prophets who are to be found the universal function of salvation, but rather is a human person who existed as the bosom of the visible community of Israel 20 centuries ago. For just as the Word became flesh in Jesus Christ, so did the Bath Kol, the daughter of the voice, become flesh in Mary Sophia. The Church worships her as the Virgin, as the Mother, and as the Celestial Queen, corresponding to the Mother, the Daughter, and the Virgin of Israel of the Kabbalah, and to Sophianic Trinity, Mother, Daughter, and Holy Soul, mentioned above. The Athenians also had an analogous feminine triad, which played the principal role in the mysteries of Eleusis, Demeter, the Mother, Persephone, the Daughter, and Athena, the bringer of salvation, where Athena was at the same time the community of Athens, or the soul of Athens, as it were, analogous to the Virgin of Israel. Historical analogies and metaphysical parallels alone, however, do not suffice to attain the complete certainty of intuition. It is for the heart to say the last decisive word. Therefore, the following argument of the heart proved to be decisive 25 years ago to the one who writes these lines. There is nothing which is more necessary and more precious in the experience of human childhood than parental love. Nothing more necessary, because the human child alone is not viable if it is not taken from the first moment of its life into the circle of care of parental love, or lacking parental love, its substitute, charity. Nothing more precious, because the parental love experienced in childhood is moral capital for the whole of life. In childhood we receive 2 dowries for life, 2 assets from which we can draw during the whole of life the vital biological asset, which is the treasure of our health and vital energy, and the moral asset, which is the treasure of health of soul and its vital energy, its capacity to love, to hope, and to believe. The moral asset is the experience of parental love that we have had in childhood. It's so precious, this experience, that it renders us capable of elevating ourselves to more sublime things, even to divine things. It's thanks to the experience of parental love that our soul is capable of raising itself to the love of God. Without it, the soul could not truly enter into a living relationship with the living God, or of a loving God, being unable to pass beyond the abstract conception of God as architect, or the first cause of the world. For it is the experience of parental love, and it is above all this which renders us capable of loving the architect or first cause of the world as our Father who is in heaven. Parental love bears in itself true senses of the soul for the divine, which are by analogy eyes and ears of the soul. Now, the experience of parental love consists of two elements: the experience of maternal love and that of paternal love. The one and the other are equally necessary and equally precious. The one and the other render us capable of raising ourselves to the divine. The one and the other signify to us the means of entering into a living relationship with God, which means to love God, who is the prototype of all paternity and all maternity. Now, love teaches in its own way, with a certainty which excludes all doubt, that the divine commandment, honour thy father and thy mother, is truly divine, i.e. that it is significant in heaven as well as on earth. Now, love teaches in its own way, with a certainty which excludes all doubt, that the divine commandments, honour thy father and thy mother, is truly divine, that it signifies that it is significant in heaven as well as on earth. Honour thy father and thy mother is applicable, therefore, not only to transitory things, but also to eternal things. Such is the commandments revealed to Moses on Mount Sinai, and such is also the commandment emanating from the depths of the human heart. One should honour the Father who is in heaven, and the celestial mother. This is why practising believers of the traditional church, i.e. the Roman Catholic Church and the Orthodox Church, caring little for the difference stated in dogmatic theology between the celestial Father and Mother, love and honour, in their practice of prayer, the celestial Mother no less than the Father who is in heaven. Dogmatic theologians may well put believers on their guard against exaggeration in the domain of Mariology, and Protestant critics may well advance criticism or the cult of the Virgin Mary as idolatry. But practising believers of the traditional church continue, and will always continue, to honour and love their celestial mother as the eternal mother of all that lives and breathes. If one says that the heart has its own reasons, which the intellect doesn't know, one can also say that the heart has its own dogmas, which theological reasoning does not know. Indeed, this dogma of the heart, although as yet not formulated, being generally confined to the domain of the unconscious, nonetheless exercises a growing influence on the guardians of dogmatic orthodoxy, of a kind such that the latter are constrained to give way, through the centuries, one position after another, to the irresistible impulse in liturgical forms and in the practice of prayer sanctioned by ecclesiastical authorities. The role accorded to Mary does not stop growing. The Queen of the Angels, the Queen of the Patriarchs, the Queen of the Apostles, the Queen of the Martyrs, Confessors, Virgins and Saints, the Queen of Peace, is in the text of liturgical prayer also the Mother of God, the Mother of Divine Grace, and the Mother of the Church. In the churches of the Greek Orthodox Church one sings, more honoured than the cherubim, more glorious than the seraphim, thou, who art the true Mother of God, we honour thee. Now one cherubim and seraphim are the first celestial hierarchy, and the Holy Trinity alone is above them. This dogma of the heart is so powerful that the time will come when it will result in official recognition from the Church and will be formulated. For it's thus that all Church dogmas have arrived in the past at their promulgation. They live first of all in the hearts of the believers, then influence more and more the liturgical life of the Church, in order lastly to be promulgated as formulated dogmas. Dogmatic theology is only the last stage of the way of dogma, which begins in the depths of the life of souls and results in ceremonious promulgation. This way is exactly what is understood by the direction of the Church by the Holy Spirit. The Church knows it and has the patience to wait, even for centuries, the time when the work of the Holy Spirit will have attained to maturity. Be that as it may, whatever the duration of time for the mysterious process of the birth of the dogma, raising maternal love to the level of Holy Trinity may be, it is already well formulated and is at work across the centuries. All the same, it's a matter, whilst respecting the law of patience and abstaining from all attempts to force things, of cultivating feelings and ideas relating to divine maternal love, and of mediating on the ancient Hermetic doctrines which reveal the mystical, Gnostic and magical meaning of this aspect of divine love. In other words, it's a matter of mediating on the mystery of the luminous Holy Trinity, whose symbol is the seal of Solomon, the Hermetic, the hexagram, or again on the symbol of Trinity alongside that of the luminous Holy Trinity. Here we have a triangle and the hexagram. This symbol of the development from the Holy Trinity to the luminous Trinity, i.e. from the triangle to the hexagram, is at the same time the divine meaning, or the highest that I know, of the number 9. 10 further spiritual exercises were necessary for us after the meditation on the 9th arcanum of the tarot, in order to dare to touch on the theme of the developments of the Holy Trinity into the luminous Holy Trinity, symbolised by the triangle alongside the hexagram. We have indicated above that it is the practice of prayer and the liturgical life of the Church where the great truths anticipate the promulgations as dogmas. Now the mystery of the number 9, that of the development of the Trinity to the luminous Trinity, also lives in the practice of prayer and ritual within the Church. I have in mind the practice universally diffused in the Catholic Church of the Novena, the most practised form of which is the act of prayer, consisting of 1 Paternoster and 3 Ave Marias, to which one devotes oneself for 9 days. One makes a novena by appealing to the paternal love of the Father, Paternoster, and to the maternal love of the Mother, the 3 Ave Marias, simultaneously for 9 days, for the sake of a person or a cause. What depth there is in underlying this practice, this is so simple. In truth, in any case for the Hermeticist, the direction of the superhuman wisdom of the Holy Spirit is manifested here. Similarly, it's so with the Rosary Prayer, where appeal to the 2 aspects of divine parental love in the prayer addressed to the Father and Mother is made during meditation on the mysteries of joy, suffering and glory of the Blessed Virgin. The Rosary Prayer is, in any case for the Hermeticist, again a masterpiece of simplicity, containing and revealing things of inexhaustible profundity, a masterpiece of the Holy Spirit. Dear unknown friend, the arcanum the Sun with which we are occupied is an arcanum of children bathing in the light of the sun. Here it's not a matter of finding occult things, but rather of seeing ordinary and simple things in the light of day of the sun and with the look of a child. The 19th arcanum of the tarot, the arcanum of intuition, is that of revelatory naivety in the act of knowledge, which renders the spirit capable of an intensity of look not troubled by doubt and by scruples engendered by doubt, i.e. the vision of things such as they are under the eternally new day of the sun. It teaches the art of undergoing the pure and simple impression which reveals through itself, without intellectual hypothesis and superstructures, what things are. To render impressions numinous. This is what it is a matter of in the Arcanum the Sun, the Arcanum of Intuition. You will understand, therefore, dear unknown friend, that in speaking of parental love and of its two aspects, in speaking of the practice of the Novena and the Rosary Prayer, we are in no way estranging ourselves from the theme of the 19th Arcanum of the Tarot. Rather, on the contrary, we are penetrating to its very heart. For we are endeavouring to advance from an understanding of what intuition is to its exercise, i.e., from meditation on the Arcanum of Intuition to the use of this Arcanum. Okay, there's a lot in that second part. So that concludes the end of chapter 19, the Sun, Meditations on the Tarot. I hope you enjoyed that, and I will see you for the next letter.